Hi. Before I start, there will be a few references to some things that I will have to explain at the end. So, I don't want to give anything away, so I think it would be better to go ahead and read it and then explain later at the end. Brainchild by Summer McGaw. Dedicated to Marion Craper, Natasha, Drew, Jeanette, Rudy, Dane, Ivan, Talia, and all of my other brainchildren. Where do I start looking at you tonight? Curling your fingers around mine obligingly, then letting go. Laughing deeply into my face. No way. No way, you're not laughing at me, but how can you be this close? This into me? Into my world? Into my face? Your eyeline dripping sweat down my forehead as my chest manages to heave. We started laughing inexplicably, or maybe there was some joke, but how can I remember now? Am I still laughing? Just how do you bring out these sides of me? 1 minute ago, when you bore inside with your eyes this way, the way you did at some point, sometime, you remember when? Just how did it start? But somehow, inside of your mesmerizing brass and crass manner, you won the one most abashed one in the world. Staring back now at you, I never expected this, and I always thought it might be just like this. Just for, someone other than me. But this time, within all these questions right now, my favorite is, why are we even laughing? Because the answer is the one I can't for the sake of anything in the world and the universe in your hands remember. But it's okay. More okay than I've ever been. Really, where should I begin? I'm not the voice of the previous paragraph. I'm the author Autumn Michaels. I can't just say this is my story, because I can just imagine right now what a certain guy would say to interrupt right here, which reminds me, let me introduce my brainchild, Devin Anetrin. Specifications. Hair color, depending on the particular book, may range from any rainbow of brunette shades to deep auburns, to even include mixes when I get indecisive. Chocolate-colored Macintosh, hair in shaggy layers? Anyone? Eye color. Green that ranges from a succulent candy to dark and dangerous. Favorite lines. But look what you found. Let me show you how we can make use of time like it's burning out. Hobbies. Letting his mouth get him in trouble, that he's always almost left to his own devices to escape. But unless it's something very serious, his most loyal friends always resolve it with him by the end. Spending most of his time with Charlene, the love interest of his ex-best friend, James. Or, hey, I just knew he'd jump in. Well, I might as well let you know that he's here too. Well, go ahead, Devin. I just knew you'd interrupt me. What was it you were going to say about me? What do you want them to know about you? Just start from there. Don't pretend you're modest. You're the least innocent character I've ever thought of, but you dreamed me up, didn't you? That's what matters. To sum myself up, I'm very daring, sly, and if Charlene would only admit it, I'm irresistible. Interrupted me again. Well, I did write you that way, didn't I? But you're laughing. I get through to you. Wrong, Devin. Don't forget everything you are comes through me. I choose for you what I filter. For example, there are plenty of unsavory words that will never grace your lips. Not ever. Because you love me. Of course, but don't forget who has the power here. You and your empty threats. You know what will happen if you stop writing. No, please. Don't remind me. Well, why else would we be here? He has a point. I always have. Devin, do we have to fight through the entire narrative, or will you let me speak? Thank you. I'm sitting in my house, on my floor, 1 minute from slumping down, draping my hair along the dusty, grimy tiles, and hugging my knees. But I've got this notebook in my hand, and it's the only solace I have for miles around. Internet, off by choice. Lights, off by choice save for one lamp near me in the room, providing all the light I need right now. Doors, locked. Phone, off by choice. Some writers can refer to this cut from technology as the #1 way to plug back inside their heads, but for me, it's something else. I couldn't be more plugged into my mind and stories and writing craft if I tried. That's the issue. So I need to tell you about Devin. Not the things you know from books, but everything you never knew. Where he began, where my brain was, who and what interrupted my mind. Who and what impregnated my mind with him. I need to take you back to his literal conception because those who know me know he is not me. So where did he come from? It started with the end of my love for someone who'd moved on and cheated me both out of my innocence and for a long while my hope and optimism. There was no hope of ever going back to him, not after what flashbacks and hindsight could no longer hide from me. Still, I wanted to understand. Could it be possible for someone who loves you to rape you, defile you, without being an evil person? Don't good people do evil things sometimes? My questions were focused on his emotions, and through a story I tried to examine those questions. That book took me at least a year to complete, and by the time I'd finished it, the character Devin had become so influenced by so many different sources, from music and books to movies. He was no longer a hypothetical reimagining of my own experiences, and no longer even vaguely resembled the personality of the man who'd given me such pain in my past. Maybe it's because the memories themselves were too painful to replicate completely, but Devin was more than a reinvention. The more complex he became, the more attached I was. The less predictable he was. Until he came alive to summon me back and continue his character development. This meant tearing down the ending I'd created to reconstruct an open path to the sequel. It was frightening at first, listening to music, and suddenly, a line would jump out as though he were there with me, pointing it out. I want that line. Can you fit it into the next one? Even more frightening, I began responding. No, I'll have to reword it a little in order for you to have it, but I'll figure it out. This was all weird, but as long as I kept my correspondence a secret, what harm could come of it, right? But then it started. I'd try to go on about my own life, like an assistant showing me the way to the next plot point. He wouldn't leave my head. Friends and family got concerned when I mentioned my stories, telling me constantly, Devin's not real, Devin's not real. As advised, I took a long break from those stories, but he wouldn't go away. Mentally, always reminding me what the next part in the book I'm going to write was. Then as I grew, he started to seemingly grow with me, till I feared that he was developing his own mind. Within my mind. He threatened to make me forget things unless I promised to write as soon as I got home. I started working so much quicker and making lousy mistakes, and the boss took notice. I was in a rush to leave and write, but there was no way I could explain anything like that. I knew it sounded crazy. Rumors started that I had a boyfriend to get back to, but it was my book, my secret, my passion. And I did fall in love sometimes. With real people. I would fear their reaction to me writing into my books. Worst of all, I was afraid they'd not approve of Devin, as though he were my real son. What if a man told me to stop writing? And I grew so in love with him that I agreed. Devin would never forgive me, and I don't know if I could forgive me. Just now, I was on a date with someone I trusted, but then my guardedness about fearing someone will require me to stop creating, stop writing, kicked in when he said, "I heard from Krista, you've written a series of books. I could never have that amount of control and order. You must be so organized." I went into a panic. I checked the back of my neck for sweat, hearing my voice crack as I said, "I wouldn't call it control or order. I'm compelled. When an idea comes to me, it's as though those stories already exist. I'm just discovering them." He laughed and said I was funny, and my panic attack was getting worse. When I told him I had to go, I cried all the way back there. I wasn't being funny. I don't have control over it. But that is part of what draws me into writing. Writing gives me the freedom of not having any control whatsoever. If the characters are given enough motivation, I can let the idea be their playground to run wild with. I'm just the proud parent of my brain children, sitting on a bench and writing it all down as it happens. That's the very freedom and escape I need, and control doesn't apply to it, at least not in my situations. So I'm here, locked up, and giving myself time away from the world. It's non-fiction this time, but now that I've written this far, I feel better. I'm not frightened anymore. I need to apologize to my date. I shouldn't have left like that. And I don't really want to let him go, because while I was with him, I was able to relax. And not be a writer. I didn't have to think about Devin's next story, Devin's next line, or anything but that moment, enjoying time with a man who was only being respectful of me. I need to go and apologize to him, but first I want to leave this. If the horrible things going on all the time in the news, and in your own circle of friends, if that evokes feeling, and if feeling is real, then couldn't a book plot evoke real emotion enough to make the character real in your mind for a while? I know that I created Devin, but he's just as real to me as any memory. He's my brainchild. That was the end of the short story. Okay. Okay, first of all, her name is sort of like almost a reversal of mine in a way, in order to distance myself. And I chose the name Devin Enetrin. And that combines a name that I made up, well, not completely made up, but chose on the spot that was not something I had previously chosen, with something that I had once almost chosen as a last name for a character in my first book, Enetrin, as a last name. And Devin is supposed to represent Rudy. The very mildly mentioned James is supposed to be rhyming with Dane, because that's who he's supposed to represent. And then Charlene is supposed to be a name in place for Jeanette. And yeah, when I was finished writing the first story that had Rudy, Jeanette, and Dane in it, I thought I was over, and then I had a dream that made me think about the story as if Rudy himself was calling me back into writing it. And I couldn't just end it, and it had been just ended, and I was listening to the song I Want You by Pulp, and there were so many lines in that song that made me think of Rudy and his standpoint through all of the stuff, and I couldn't leave it there. It was like Rudy was calling me back into the story, big time, just calling me back, and so right after that I started writing the second book, and the second book was so weird for me because I got so immersed not only in nostalgia for the characters, which is weird because you can't have nostalgia for something you never experienced, but when you're writing it, it's like you are experiencing it. So I was writing it and missed Rudy and missed the characters as though they were real friends, and I got a little bit carried away with my sort of like wanting to write the book, wanting to write it. I would be on vacation, I'd have my laptop, I would open my laptop and I'd be writing. I don't even know what book it was at that point. Maybe the third. But the point was I couldn't end it. I couldn't find some way to put a close to it. Even writing the sequel, even writing the third, the fourth, and now the fifth of it, I haven't wanted to finish with these characters. And anyway, I started feeling like, what would they be telling me? Like, what would they want? What would they want people to know about them in this book? What would they not want people to know? What would be important for people to know? So that's part of it too. Anyways, so for me, like, the world of discos is very, I feel like I've been there with all of them, and every time I write another one of them, I'm back there again. I'm back in that world, and I can make my life just as interesting, but it's not going to be the same sort of feeling ever as I get when I'm writing it. I don't know if that makes sense. I guess one thing is that it's fun not knowing everything, but in real life it's not fun not knowing everything. Problems don't feel as fun to solve in real life. It just feels like you're caught in it. There's no way to ever escape it, and you don't know how it's going to end. You don't want to know. But for me, that's different with writing. I do want to know how it's going to end. I do feel like there's going to be some way out of the problem, out of the mess, that somehow it'll get better. And there are a few more elements to this story that do tie in with my own experiences, like the thing with Devin being based on a character, based on a real person. Rudy was based at first on a real person, and pretty much the same way, but I changed, like in the same way too, I did change some things about Rudy to make him different and unique. And that's another thing too. I'm aware that the next 2 or 3 books may be the last Disco's books. That is still hard for me, but animating it helps so much, because when I animate it, it's closer to making it live. Like, writing is supposed to breathe life into things, and to a point it does. But visuals also help. So that makes the process of knowing that I'm not going to be writing these characters forever a lot easier for me. And to conclude, I also feel like it's not crazy completely to feel like your characters feel real. They are real. Because it's like memories. Even though they're not things that have happened. It's something special that I don't quite know how to completely go into, but they do feel very real for me. I'm not sure what else to say. Hope you enjoyed it.